Ribal Al Assad, welcome to Hardtalk.
Thank you very much.
The last couple of days, we've seen a blizzard of promised concessions from Damascus, but do you think it's enough?
Actually, the speech that President Assad made 2 days ago, it was very disappointing. And today we are asking for actions and not words. And he still has very small window of opportunity. As we've heard, Foreign Minister William Hague and other leaders, they are all still giving him a window of opportunity, and he should take that and move to actions right away.
So he's offered an amnesty, he's offered a dialogue, he's offered multi-party elections, he's offered to pull the Ba'ath Party back from monopoly of power. None of that is enough.
It's not that it's enough. The main thing that he says, it's very interesting, and it's, of course, we welcome it, but we need actions. They have said this before.
And so what action? What do you need to see?
He needs to move right away into forming a national unity government. They should allow a multi-party system. They should allow all political parties who believe in genuine democracy to be established in Syria. They have also to abolish the Article 8 of the Constitution, which is the most important, which states that the Ba'ath Party is the leader of state and society, which today is completely unacceptable.
You're saying also multi-party elections, immediately a national unity government.
Yes.
Why doesn't the president do this? Is he not actually in control?
It seems like he's not. It seems like, as I said, a lot of people, it's a regime, it's not a one-person regime. It's a, as we all know, Bashar inherited the regime from his father. He was not elected, and the people around him who inherited themselves the powers from their fathers before them are the people who do not want to see any change. As I said, those people, they are very worried about their own interests. At the same time, today we are also seeing people from the opposition who are not, they're not very democratic. A lot of them have lived in the West for the past years, for the past 30 or so, some of them over 30 years. But again, they still continue to incite hatred and sectarian violence, which again is completely unacceptable. And we don't want to see that in Syria. We don't want to get rid of a dictatorship to get a theocracy or another dictatorship in place.
Just to look at the process, in what elements do you think this might be reminiscent of Egypt and Tunisia, and in which elements not? Because in those cases we saw high-level defections. There came a point where key figures within the establishment who might have previously taken the line that you're describing, thinking to themselves, it's now or never, I've got to jump.
But it's not exactly the case. Syria is very different from Egypt and Tunisia. Syria has a lot of minorities and a lot of ethnic groups. For example, in Syria, as you know, we have the Kurds, you have Arabs, you have Sherkas, you have Turkmen, you have Armenians, you have Christians, you have Muslims, Alawites, Sunnis, Shias, Druze.
And of course, those figures at the top of the establishment that you were mentioning a minute ago, yes, the ones at the heart of particularly the security forces, they are predominantly Alawite.
Again, this is not true. This is what the opposition is trying to tell the international community, but this is not true. You know, we have to be fair here. You know, there's a president is an Alawite, his cousin is an Alawite, his brother is, but a lot of generals, including, for example, the ex-minister of defense and his son, Manaf Tlas, who's also, member of the presidential guards. You have the vice president who is not. You have Ali Mamlouk, head of a secret apparatus, who is not. So the prime ministers and a lot of other ministers are not.
So coming back to the question I was asking you, why aren't we seeing high-level defections? I mean, you started describing a situation of an ethnic and religious tapestry,
yes,
but how does that relate to people's unwillingness to defect at the top level?
Again, a lot of people want changes, but they don't want to see people similar to the ones that were at the Antalya conference coming, and they're the ones that
You mean the Antalya conference, as in the conference at the beginning of this month by
yes,
opposition groups in Turkey?
Yes, exactly.
Why don't they want to see that?
Because there are a lot of Islamists who were there.
That consultative council that came out of that meeting, yes, in Turkey, that they said that their objectives were to support the demonstrations and to help raise international pressure against President Assad. And that, to quote their documentation, the revolt in Syria is a national movement that does not aim to undermine any sect.
It's true, but they're trying to hijack those peaceful demonstrations. As we have all heard, the people, when they first came out, the protesters, they were all chanting, peace, 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 111, all the Syrian people are one. So the opposition has to listen to what the people are saying, the same way as we are asking the regime to listen at those protesters and what they're chanting. We are also asking the opposition to be not to do the same mistake as the regime and to start listening to the slogans of those protesters. They don't want to see any separations. Any kind of opposition should have all groups who believe in democracy, in genuine democracy, not people who are...
But coming back to this group in power, presumably the problem there is that they're having the kind of paranoid response that you're describing, and that means instead of seeing the opposition as a national opposition, they're seeing it as representing sectional interests. I mean, we've heard, of course, the president talking about saboteurs and conspirators.
Yes. In one way, as I said, there are people in his own regime, in the security apparatus, who have done a lot of, who have committed a lot of atrocities and repression against the people, which is, this is, acts of atrocities. It's completely unacceptable. On the other side, you have also people, Islamists, who are trying to hijack those protesters and are committing also acts of violence. And I've seen some videos, in which there were horrible languages used when they killed those soldiers at the Shahor, for example. One of the people saying, look at this dog, he looks like an Alawite because of his haircut.
Well, that's a measure of how dangerous, I suppose, things are becoming. So getting back to the basics of the struggle, do you think there is anything that the president could say or do at this point, other than more brutal retaliation, which would persuade protesters to go home?
I think that the first thing that he should do, they should form a national reform implementation committee. And this committee, it should include people from the democratic opposition and people from the regime. They should sit together and discuss how they're going to form a national unity government, and they should put a schedule, they should put a clear timetable to that.
And you think that's still possible? Because, of course, there are some who think events have gone beyond that, and for the opposition who've seen some of their members tortured, killed, they may feel that there is no future, that to risk their lives by going into some kind of talks with the government would only provoke further outrages.
Today, the thing is that the regime is there, Bashar is there. So we have to be very practical and pragmatic. It's either he's going to bring change or he has to step aside, and he has to do it right away. He cannot waste any more time.
The French Foreign Minister Alain Juppé says it's too late already. He says some believe there's still time for him to change his ways and commit to a reform process. For my part, I doubt it. He says, I think the point of no return has been reached.
No, it hasn't been reached, and as you've seen, other leaders, from the international community have not completely agreed to that, because they know that the situation is not as easy, and he still has, support of his party. He has some support, and also he has support of Iran and of other groups in the region, and any sectarian conflict in Syria, we have to avoid it, because that would have a very negative effect on the whole region.
And so talking about what he should or would do you think there's a danger that he will go on, or those around him will go on, trying to bludgeon the public into submission, trying to crush the uprising by force?
The people around him, I said, it's in their interests. Of course it's their interest, because any reforms would mean that they will be trialed. A lot of them will be held into account, and they will have to pay the price for what they've done.
And obviously this brings up all kinds of painful ghosts from the past, and indeed the President in his speech on Monday referred to the problems of the 1980s, which in 1982 Syria saw the last terrible slaughter following an uprising, and fears that we're seeing now a new generation suffering the same kind of tragedy. And this, of course, particularly resonant for you, because many people, many critics, including the Syrian Human Rights Committee, including Amnesty International, accused your father of masterminding the repression on that occasion.
Yes. First, we also have to remember that at the time, the regime wanted to blame everything on my father. My father was not involved into Hama. My father was head of a unit called Unit 569, because at the time there wasn't any Republican Guard or any presidential guards. The Unit 569's job was the protection of Damascus, the capital. And as you know, Hama is 200 kilometers outside of Damascus. So we had internal troubles in Syria, internal danger from the Muslim Brotherhood, who were an armed group who rose against the state. And again, there was the danger of, there was at the same time the Israeli invasion of Lebanon. So and as you know, Lebanon is much closer. I mean, the borders of Lebanon is much closer than Hama, from the capital. So it's not logical that my father would, take his troops from outside, from Damascus and go 200 kilometers outside of the capital to fight the Islamists, while you had many regiments.
I'm just going to have to
government.
Quote you others. I mean, I quoted already
No,
the Syrian Human Rights Committee, Amnesty International, also the American author Thomas Friedman. He quotes Western diplomats saying President Assad entrusted overall responsibility for taming Hama to your father.
Yes, as I said, because my father was the only person at that time who was calling for democracy in the 70s. He was the only person who had a media outlet. I mean, the Al Fursan magazine, who was every edition calling for democracy and why democracy was important for a country like Syria. The regime at the time was getting very annoyed with him. He had the support of the Ba'ath Party, he had a lot of support in the military, so they wanted him out. And in '84, after, as you know, the conspiracy that happened to take him out of Syria, the regime wanted to go into negotiation with the Muslim Brotherhood, which they did.
But it's simply not credible, is it, to say that this is all a conspiracy cooked up by the other side of the Assad family to paint your father as the villain? I mean, he's on record, for example, in 1980, quoted in the official newspaper, Tishrin Daily, saying of the Muslim Brotherhood, we will wage 100 wars in order to exterminate them.
But this is inaccurate, and I've never heard it. Again, I told you that the people, for example, Friedman, as you've mentioned him before, he says in his book that a friend of him told him that my father told him, so we cannot base things, realities, on somebody told somebody, and he doesn't even name the sources. He doesn't come out with any justifications. Again, Mr. Robert Fisk, whom I sat
it's
with.
It's not just Robert Fisk. I mean,
I'm saying
over the past
those
couple
people.
of
I
days,
said, Mr. Friedman, Mr. Fisk. Mr. Fisk has been there for 18 minutes. He told me, I read it in his book. So you cannot just come out and blame everything on somebody just of what was said,
But
the regime
to quote
told
you, for example, I mean, it's not just a question of these journalists. That Amir al-Azm, for example, at the Syrian Opposition Consultative Council, which we were talking about in Turkey, meeting there, he says, from the Syrian people's point of view, the crimes of Rifat, your father, are well documented. Ribal, yourself, has not stepped out from his father or condemned the crimes. Ribal and Rifat will not be welcome at the Opposition Council.
But what does Mr. Al-Adam represent? Who does he represent? And this is also what we have to see. Who does he represent? Where are the crimes that he's talking about? They're documented. Where is the responsibilities that he's talking about? This is why we should not talk. We should not blame each other if you don't have justification. When I talked about some people on the council...
Yes, but the Syrian Human Rights Council,
yes,
Amnesty International, many journalists, diplomats, historians. We have talked to a number of people in the last couple of days trying to get to the bottom of the Hama massacre and the evidence surrounding your father's involvement. And I have to tell you, I have not met anyone or talked to anyone over the last couple of days other than yourself who believes that your father didn't mastermind this. So quite apart from the historical question of whether or not he did, you have a problem of perception.
There is a problem. Of course, there is a problem because I said the regime. You're against a regime, and at the time the regime, it was very strong, and everybody sided with him. Like for example, in '99, when they bombed our house in Latakia, and they came out and said it was an illegal port. I was in '99, and I had just left Latakia to see my family in Spain, and all the Western media came out and gave the side of the regime. They gave their story. They said the minister of information in Syria came out and said we attacked an illegal port belonging to Ribal Al Assad. Thanks to YouTube today, you could see that it was a house, and there are
just
pictures of the house
getting back to the
that was
Hama massacre, though, has your father ever condemned the massacre?
He said in his only, I think, interview with the AP a few years ago, he said, I've never been to Hama, and I have nothing to do with Hama.
That's not actually condemning what happened there.
He never. Everybody is against what happened. I mean, everybody is against any killing between your own people. We are all against any atrocity, any repression. We are. This is why we've been working for democracy all these years, because it's very important, as I said, in a country like Syria, that we move towards democracy. This is the only way. Religious pluralism is the only way that a country like Syria could survive, and that everybody could live together, all minorities could live together, protected under the rule of law.
So, on that score, I mean, you are in charge of an organisation based here called the Organisation for Democracy and Freedom, so political pluralism, and on the religious side, the Imam Foundation. But what do you have to contribute? You lived in exile for most of your life. You have all the problems of your surname. You have the problems surrounding your father's history. I'm
like any other citizen. Being an Assad is not any person, any citizens of Syria, has the right to work for democracy and freedom in his country. This is something that should not be, you cannot be barred, just from being an Assad for working for democracy. I'm not here bidding for, I'm not having any bid for power.
You're not really just any other exile, are you? I mean, there you are living in Mayfair on one of the most wealthy streets in London.
This is actually, I had an interview with CNN today, 3 days ago, and they came to my place, and I'm not living in Mayfair. This, again, we have to be, very clear and know exactly the facts before we talk about things. I don't live in Mayfair. I live actually in the Marylebone area. And, I'm a businessman. I started doing businesses in China. I went to China in 2003 and set up a trading office there. And I'm working like any other, young person. I could have been in Syria with the regime, working with the regime and taking advantage of the system or being a corrupt person, but I would never accept that.
So coming back to what you can contribute then, yes. You're not in Syria, you've barely spent any time in your life in Syria. You can't, for reasons of this family history, participate in all the exile movements, the meeting in Turkey, etc. As we've said, you're not welcomed there. What can you contribute to Syria's future?
But any person is, they are not, we have, there's not, the opposition groups are not just the people who were at the Antalya conference. There are many opposition groups. We are, for example, setting up a conference which will be held up very soon, and you will see that there are many other people. We are a very large group, and that have nothing to do with the Antalya, the people who are at the Antalya conference, which were mostly Islamist. For example, the Kurds were not there. All the Kurdish groups were not there. The Damascus Declaration people, they were not there. So a lot of people, a lot of opposition people were excluded. And if you want to work for a future of a country together, if we want to build the future of a country together, we have to believe in reconciliation. We have to be forgiving. We cannot work with hatred and holding grudges and say this person is an Assad, this person is an Alawite.
But it's not so easy to shrug off history, is it? I mean, for decades of dynastic rule in Syria by the Assad family. And just to quote you, Walid Safur, for example, of the Syrian Human Rights Committee, he says, the Assads think ruling Syria is a matter for the Assad family. They are hated by the majority.
Well, Mr. Walid Safur was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, so he could say whatever he wants,
So you just shrug that off? There isn't a problem with your family?
Because it's not the Assad. Not all the Assads. This, again, you have a lot of Assads in Syria. They can go and check themselves before talking about the whole Assad family, which 95% of the family, of the Assad family, have no privileges. A lot of them don't own cars. A lot of them don't have jobs. So they should not talk about the whole Assad family. They should not talk about the whole Alawites. They should not talk about a sect or everybody, or, they should always choose the people. We have to be very transparent.
So I'm still puzzled by what future you see for yourself in this new Syria. Do you expect that you will be able to go back and play a political role?
I don't want any political role. All what I'm doing is, as I said, is campaigning for democracy and freedom for my country. All what I want is, I have a baby son now. I want him to grow up, being able to go back to his own country, visiting him without being living in fear of being killed because he's an he's an Alawite or
so you won't go back,
or an Assad, or
you hope for,
or without being by the regime, stopped by the regime, arrested by the regime because he's my son.
So you hope for a better future for the next generation, but your generation?
No, I even hope for my generation that I could one day be able. Yes, I couldn't since '99, since they bombed our house. I wasn't able to go back. And who doesn't love to be able to go back and see his family in his country? I have many nephews and nieces that I haven't met yet because they live in Syria.
But just to be absolutely clear, your role in the political future of Syria, not a frontline political role?
No, not at all. I refuse that. As I said, I love too much my freedom. I enjoy, living in the West. I enjoy the freedom that we all enjoy. But I want every Syrian to enjoy that. I want to. I wouldn't be. I wouldn't love. I wouldn't like to live locked. In in a system anywhere in the world.
Hard to see, though, that the struggles that you're talking about are anything other than ones inside the Assad family, rather than the struggle of those on the streets of Damascus, Aleppo, Daraa.
In what way? What do you mean by it's hard to see?
Well, as you're describing assassination attempts, the issues of corruption, the questions of history, your family, not any other family, and not any other family today, not any other family tomorrow. Whatever you would wish for your son.
Yes. As I said, we don't want anything from, as from my own point of view, I don't want anything to have to do with the government. All what I want is a better life for everybody, for every Syrian citizen. I want them to live free from repression, free from a dictatorship regime. It's all what matters.
And what is the timescale for that then? Because just to quote you, for example, Israel's Defense Minister Ehud Barak, he said this week, President Assad will reach his demise within 6 months. What do you see? What's the timescale?
I honestly think we are at a brink of a regional war, and it's very dangerous because the regime in Syria is not a regime standing on its own. It's a regime that has alliances with Iran, with a lot of groups like Hezbollah, with groups like Sadr militias in Iraq, and many other groups in Iraq.
So regional war is a distinct possibility?
It's a very big possibility.
Ribal Al Assad, thank you for joining us on
You're
Hardtalk.
welcome.